Hey there, welcome to Innovate Africa. My name is Kino Cummings and I'll be taking care of you each and every week. And the show really centers around storytelling, telling stories of innovations, innovators, their businesses, and how they actually impact Africans' lives. That's the cornerstone of what we discuss. But we're also about connecting those businesses to opportunities. So today, without any further ado, let me introduce you to a man who is, I think, an investor rock star. His name is Hans Otterling. Hans, it's been a pleasure. I've been chatting to you over the last couple of years about the good work you're doing on the continent. You are synonymous with investments in companies like Spotify, for example, and Klarna. You've now moved to South Africa. You've co-founded the Norrsken22 Impact Fund for Africa, which is a $200 million fund. The big question is, where did this all start for you, though, personally?
You know, I actually started out as an entrepreneur in the tech sector. I always wanted to be an entrepreneur from when I was small. I had this desire to have my own company. And I was lucky, got a great team around me, great founding partners. And we needed capital. So I started to raise capital. And actually, to be an entrepreneur, one of the most important things is actually to be able to tell your stories, not only to people that work with you, but also to investors. And it turned out that, things were going pretty well. And I had some really big brand names investing into my company, London-based companies, Apex, Lansdowne, and so on. So I early on learned to sit on the other side of the table as an entrepreneur, negotiating term sheets, pref shares, all the things that these investors come up with. And when I sold my tech company and moved back to Sweden in 2006, I said to myself, what can I do now, right? And I wanted to be still in tech, and I said maybe I can start doing some investments on my own with the experience I have as an entrepreneur and the experience I have from working with other big venture capitalists. So that's where it all started. So I started to do some investments on my own. And then at that time in Europe, in 2006, 2007, venture capital was very small, very provincial, almost like here in Africa today, right? It wasn't a lot of venture funds around. And then I started to work together with NorthZone, the fund that I later became a partner of. And one of the first companies we met was Spotify. So we invested in Spotify, and I said to myself, wow, this is easy. And then I realized that, that was one of the best venture investments ever done in Europe, until today, actually. It's been a fantastic journey. And it also lifted our partnership, NorthZone, from being a small provincial fund to become a European player. And then later on, I was running into the founders of Klarna, which today is one of the largest fintech companies in Europe, also have a big operation in the US. And I met the three founders there. One of them is Niklas, who is also the founder of Norrsken Foundation. And Niklas and I, after my journey in Europe, I was with Norrsken. I'm still with NorthZone. But in 2018, 14 years later, I said to myself, I need to do something new. I went into my team in London. I said, I'm going to take a very long lunch. I'm moving to Cape Town. And I'm going to see what's going on the African continent.
Now, you also find a lot of people complaining about Africa, about South Africa in particular. They're saying, why would anybody want to invest there? And to the contrary, you've moved here, you've invested here. Why are you backing the continent?
So I saw Europe, the tech scene growing up. Right. So when I started, as I said before, there was very small venture community in Europe. And today, Europe is vibrant, right? You go to Berlin, you go to London, you go to Paris, you go to Madrid, Barcelona, you go to Stockholm. Everywhere there's a tech scene, right? And that happened, from 2010 and forward, I would say. I believe Africa is at that moment Europe 2010. I think, we sit here 5 years from now, the scene will change completely. And the reason is the following. The reason is that the continent, it's about 1.4 billion people living on the African continent. 60% are below 25 years old. So you have about 700 million young people growing up with aspirations, looking forward to a good life, with a mobile phone in their hand for the first time, connected to the internet. So they are connected to the world, and the world is connected to them. So this cohort of about 700 million young people, they will change the continent the next 5 to 10 years.
Okay. Now, Hans, when it comes to young people on this continent, I personally don't like us just seeing them as people with cell phones that can be sold to. I think we need to do more to empower them from an educational perspective, to turn them into a middle class. How do you view young people on this continent?
So education is I'm glad you're mentioning that, because, how well educated a country's population is, that's their core competitive edge as a nation. That's the kind of growth engine, right? And I strongly believe that with tech today, people can educate them anywhere in the world, particularly in Africa, where maybe the school system has not just been as well built as the rest of the world. But you have information accessible, as an African, you can access information as like anyone in the world, right? So that's gonna drive. And then I also a strong believer that talent is equally distributed across the globe, right? So if you have 1 million people in Africa, or 1 million people in US, or 1 million people in Europe, you will find about the same talent in each one of these in this group. And talent, if you're gonna build a great company, you need three things. You need someone who's an entrepreneur who has an idea. Secondly, you need some capital. The third thing you need is talent. You need great co-workers. You need someone who can help you build this company. And I think actually there's a massive talent pool in Africa which is untapped. The biggest problem in Europe and US at the moment is not capital, it's not ideas, it's actually who's going to do the work. Where the talent pool is depleted. And that's not the case here.
Let's talk Norrsken22, this impact fund, the $200 million fund. On the continent, how do you see the role of Norrsken22 when it comes to impacting Africa?
So when I lived here in the beginning, I realized that there's quite a lot of small angel networks, I would say serious seed and Series A funds around. So there was a great ecosystem there. But when a company needs growth capital, so then when they go to the next stage in growth, there was very few funds in place. So our idea is to create a fund big enough, 200 million, and then be able to write a little bit larger checks than other funds have done. But more importantly, since I've been working in Europe for so many years, I know I can call into other venture funds in Europe and say, hey, I have this great company, I'm going to put in a check on X million dollars. Would you like to join me? And most likely, if I call the right person, they will say, yes, this sounds super interesting, I'm coming in. So we hope that our 200 million is going to be $1 billion in capital coming into the continent. So that's one part. Another important thing is actually also to connect global entrepreneurs with African entrepreneurs. So couple of things. First of all, if you want to know something about an industry like fintech or Spotify or music industry, the best person to call is a guy who's really working in it, right? So calling into Spotify, calling into Klarna, which is in fintech, ask them, what do you think about this space? What's your experience? So when we find a company here in Africa, we have a great talent pool of entrepreneurs in Europe that we can call and ask, what do you think about this company? What's the growth potential, etc. And then we also can ask them to co-invest with us, to be investors, but also be advisors to these African entrepreneurs. So we want to provide capital, but we also want to create a network. And if we are successful, which I'm convinced we will be, a couple of things going to happen. we're going to put a light on Africa and say, it's very profitable, it's a very interesting market to invest into, so more capital coming in. Secondly, we create African role models. When Daniel and Martin started Spotify, there wasn't that many role models around. And when people saw, wow, Daniel and Martin, we know them. If they can do it, we can do it. The Klarna guys came, and the same thing happened. So if we can create these African role models, we will enable more people to dream and to start building companies.
We all use this word impact, and a lot of people use it quite loosely. And I remember while studying, we were taught about suitcase words. It's a word where you can pack a million meanings into. So when you say impact, what do you mean by that? Especially when it relates to the work that you're doing on the continent.
So my co-founder Niklas and I, we spent quite a lot of thoughts into this, right? And we discussed multiple issues. And obviously we have things that we will not invest into. I don't need to go into those sectors, but I'm sure you can. But we said, we came down to two things. We would like to create economic growth, and we want to show the rest of the world that it's profitable to invest in Africa. Because if we can do that, more capital will come. Absolutely. This is an underfunded market. Absolutely. Yeah. So if we can do those two things, So having said that, we are conscious about our environment, we're conscious about a lot of things, but those two things are the most important things to us: economic growth and bring more capital to the continent.
Without a doubt. But you can't be everywhere all the time. So when it comes to the continent and figuring out what you're going to focus on, what are the key focal areas, i.e. countries, that Norrsken is looking at the moment? Norrsken22. Of course, there's a difference, as we know, between the foundation and the fund.
So I think it's interesting, everyone knows that e-commerce was a little bit too early for Africa, right? And some people say, oh, it was because of the logistics. From my view, no, it was not because of the logistics. Because if you're going to buy something online, you need an online bank account. You need a credit card. And people didn't have that. So first of all, you have to enable financial inclusion. You have to bring people into the bank system. And then, we need also to do that as cheaply, as cost efficient as possible. So we talk about neobanks, we talk about digital banks like Time Banks, which we are investors into, right? So for us, fintech is important, right? Very important. Secondly, we also said we would like to remove friction in trade. So and that's kind of a more broader concept, right? But try to enable trade, enable friction, take away friction in trade, and then edtech, education, and health tech. So those are the four sectors that we are focusing on. Those are the important ones, and then we are not deciding this. This is happening by its own. You can see that tech centers are emerging in Africa the same way as they have everywhere else. Silicon Valley was the first kind of tech hub in the world, right? So we have Lagos, very vibrant. We have Nairobi, very vibrant, and Johannesburg, Cape Town. So Sub-Sahara, that's where we see most of the action. I would say 80% of our deal flow comes from these four cities, and I think the magnitude of that is just gonna continue to increase. So entrepreneurs are gonna move into the cities, talent is gonna move into the cities, capital is gonna come into the cities.
Now, Hans, the little that I do know about investments certainly leads me down this road of, in order to invest, you also need a potential pipeline of businesses that you can invest into. And if you're going to have a decent pipeline, underlying all of that needs to be fertile ground, entrepreneurial ground, on which those businesses can grow, can start, grow, and even scale. And what we've done in Cape Town, that's me and, of course, Stefan Egberg, my co-founder at Innovation City, was to create this hub in the gardens, which brings together the corporates, the scale-ups, the high-growth startups, VCs, etc. How important are hubs of this nature when it comes to growing entrepreneurship, growing potential deal flow, for VCs like Norrsken22 or other businesses, looking to partner or even acquire businesses on the continent?
I think it's extremely important. I think, again, I think Bill Gates said once, smart people attract smart people. Creative people attracts creative people. So if you can create a meeting place where people can meet, have coffees together, build trustful relationships, exchange ideas, etc., things are going to happen. And it's again this thing about building a company. You're always going to work with other and through other talented people. So your network as an entrepreneur is extremely important. And being a part of Innovation City or Norrsken Houses is a part of building that network around yourself. So you can actually take your idea and build a real company out of it.
Some would argue, Hans, that we're talking about the easy stuff. Although I'm not quite sure they know what they're talking about. But anyway, some say that, going after businesses that already have traction, already have some roadmap to scale and a clear roadway to follow, they have partnerships in the pipeline, it's easy to put money into those businesses. But what about people who are starting up new businesses on the ground in our communities? What about young people at school, for example, who might not be getting the right type of education? What is our role in trying to assist those people on the continent, right? After all, they say it does take a village to raise a child.
So I think this has a huge potential because, teachers in the villages in the past, right? They had to be everything. They had to teach math, English, history, everything, right? So it's an enormous pressure on the teacher to be skilled in all this. Now he can or she can be more a guider, a guidance, give guidance. This is what we're going to specialize on today, and they can actually pull in information over the internet in any area, in any topic, as good as anywhere else in the world, right? So you can actually accelerate the education. But I also believe very much in self-learning. An interested, a person that is curious and like to learn more. I've seen so many young entrepreneurs in Europe, like 22 years old, exiting a company getting $100 million. There are plenty of them. There are plenty of them, right? They have no education, but they're self-taught. Coming back to this natural talent, right? So if you're curious, you find a way. You find I think this is such an untapped potential for Africa, and with AI, the language barrier is going to go away as well. You don't need to know English perfectly. You can speak in your native language, and AI will translate everything over to English, and you get an advanced answer back in your own language, right? So you're actually going to remove a lot of barriers that takes years to develop, But another thing which is such a huge potential is actually that Africa is going to leapfrog. You're going to jump so many steps that your educational system is going to look different from the old school in Europe. Your medical system, your healthcare system is going to look different and so on, right? So there's going to come out new models out of Africa that we've never seen before.
Well, thank you very much for that, Hans. It's always great catching up, talking Africa, talking entrepreneurship, talking potential. And I really, really look forward to an ongoing relationship on this show so that we can find out some more about, what you're investing in as Norrsken22. And that's part of what we do on Innovate Africa. It's about shining that light on the people who innovate, the people who change lives, but also those who back them, like Hans Otterling, a man who was instrumental in investing in Spotify, one of the biggest initial investors in Spotify, then Klarna, and now the Norrsken22 Impact Fund for Africa. $200 million bet on our continent. I'll see you next week.